Hey, this is John. Welcome back to Modern Old School Developer. In the last episode, we worked on integrating more of the front and back end state together. So we can now get movies from the database using the back end and update some of the state, but not all of it. And the same thing for going the other way. We can update part of the state and send it back to the up database, but not everything. So I want to keep working on that and bring us closer. So if I go into VS Code and open our movie list component, this is where we left off. So I did change formic.set field value to be formic.set values. This will allow us to set all the values we're going to change at the same time rather than needing to set them one after another. So that'll be better when we have more of our properties in there. So first I want to set a type for this data. It is any type right now, and I want to make an actual type for it. So if we go into our API and we go under the movies ID and we go over to, we scroll down to the responses, this is an example value of what it might return. So we can use this to help us craft a type for Typescript. So let's come back over here and let's go into types and make a new file, api.typescript. And we're going to copy that in there, but we'll comment it out because we're just going to use that as a reference. So let's make an interface. So export interface movie info response type. And we're going to have an ID, which is a number, a file name, which is a string, a name, which is a string, or it might be null. There might not be a name in the database. Actors is going to be an array of actor types. So an actor response. Yeah, we actually already have an actor type, and that will work for us. So actor type from our state, if we import that, that gives us an ID and number. So we just need an array of those. All right, so it's going to be the same thing for categories. It's a category type array. And then there will be a series, which is a series type. And then there'll be a studio, which is a studio type. Now, the series and the studio might be null. So that can be or null, and that can be or null. And then there is a series number, and that is going to be a number, or it will be null. So I think that is all correct. Yeah, that looks right to me. So we can delete this example over here. And we now have our movie info response type. Okay, so let's make that in our movie list. This data is a movie info response type. So now the type string or null is not assignable to string. And that's going to help us out because I was telling you we might need to handle the null values. And there could be null values in here. So what we're going to do is we're going to use nullish coalescing, which is a weird phrase, but all it means is if we get a null value, we will supply the value on the right, and if we don't have a null value, we'll supply it on the left. So it's kind of like the question mark, only we don't have to have a second thing, because this is this one or this one. So we can use that. And what else will we be able to do? What are those other values we've updated? The studio, the series, and the series number. So what else are we going to have in here? Movie series ID. That's going to be data.series. And what is this going to be? This is going to be a series type, or it's going to be null. Okay, and this is going to tell me that number or undefined is not assignable to type string, and type undefined is not assignable to type string either. So we're going to get a number back from this, but we need to cast it to a string. And we need to make sure we actually have a data series. So we'll do it like this. If we have data series, we'll say this should be data.series.id. Otherwise, it's going to be blank. And that's still not going to work because we can't cast that to a string, but I believe we can do toString, and that should work. So what we're saying here is if we do not have a null series, give us the ID as a string, otherwise give us the empty string, which is the none value for our series. All right, there we go. So those are all handled. So now we should be able to update all of those values. So let's see if that works. So if I go over here, you can see we're getting all these nuns, but at the bottom we have Black Panther, which is in the Disney studio. We have to do that before. Avatar goes back to being none, so that is now working properly. So if I did Batman Begins, studio is going to be, I think, Warner Brothers, and series Dark Knight Trilogy, it is the first one in Dark Knight Trilogy. So there we go. We now have that. Okay, there we go. Now what happens if we erase something? If I make this a null value, what do we get from Batman Begins? We get nothing there. That looks good. So I don't know what movies are there. I needed the ID for Dark Knight. No, for Batman Begins. Where is that at? It is ID 23. So if I get movie with ID 23, Batman Begins, series number is null. So we did erase that and it became null in the database. Okay, that's what we want. So we'll go ahead and fix that. And notice that when I go back, it will reload the page and you see it's been processed. So those are appearing at the bottom now. They're on the bottom of the list. All right, so that's a good start. We've got our movie data in there. We can now update everything in here and all of those fields are reflected. We still don't have categories or actors, but we do need to make a little change before we can do that. Because while we are storing the actors that are here and the categories here, we are not storing the selections. So we're not storing the selected actors on a clip or on a movie or the selected categories. So let's go take a look and see what we need to do about that. All right, before we can reflect the selected categories, we're going to need to be able to, change the categories. So let's go make an endpoint that allows us to add a category to a movie. So let's go over to our endpoint in our backend into main where our endpoints are. And we'll scroll down. We're going to make a new endpoint, which is going to be the movie endpoints. So it's going to be similar to this. This is going to be the movie actors and movie categories. So this is going to be the association. So when you add or remove an actor and when you add or remove a category. So let's start by making an endpoint that allows us to add a category to a movie. So let's say that's a post endpoint. The endpoint is going to be movie underscore, let's just make it category, movie category. So we won't be updating them all at once, we'll update them individually. So we'll have this and our response model. I'm honestly not sure what we're going to return yet, so let's leave that blank for now. And let's define this to be add movie category. And we're going to need a database, so let's just copy this real quick. We're going to need a database session. What else are we going to need? We're going to need the ID of the movie and the ID of the category. So we need movie ID, which is an integer, and we need the category ID, which is also an integer. And when we define these as parameters to our function, if they are not of a special pydantic type, then they are assumed to be query parameters. So these are going to be query string parameters. All right, so what are we going to actually do here? Basically, all we're going to do is say crud.addMovieCategory, and we're going to add that to the movie and the ID. So let's see how we're going to associate that. Okay, I think what we'll do is we'll return the updated movie. So we'll say the response model is going to be schemas.movie, and we will have potential 404 errors because we might not be able to actually do this if either the movie ID or category ID is invalid. So let's start by saying movie equals add movie category. If movie is none, we're going to return one of those 404 errors. So let me go grab one of those real quick. All right, and I need to add that response type. So where did that go? Right here. All right, so right up here, post movie category. There we go. So this will be invalid ID again. So we can say movie ID or category ID does not exist. There we go. There is our message. All right, and if we do get a movie, we'll simply return that movie. All right, so let's say we want to pass the database, the movie ID, and the category ID. All right, so now we need to go into our CRUD and create this add movie category function. So we've got add category, add movie. So under that, we're going to have add movie category, which takes a database session, a movie ID, and a category ID. And it returns models.movie. All right, so the first thing we need to do is get the movie and the category. So movie is going to be get movie, database, and movie ID. Second thing will be to get the category. Category equals get category, database, category ID. And that function doesn't exist yet, so we need to go make that real quick. So where we did the get movie, we're going to do get category. So we're just going to copy this, and we'll say get category, and we're going to return a models.category. All right, so return database query for the category, filter by the category ID equal ID we passed in, and get the first response. All right, that should work pretty well. So let's scroll back up to add movie category. So first of all, if movie is none or category is none, we're going to return none because we can't work if we don't have both the movie and the category. So next thing is to add this category to the movie. And the way we do that is by saying movie.categories.append category. It's very easy in the object relational management way. Then we're going to do a database commit, a database refresh of the movie, and then we will return this movie. Okay, there we go. That is adding our movie category. So let's go see if that works. Let's test the endpoint using FastAPI's docs. So we can add a movie category. So we're going to try it out. We'll add category 1 and movie ID 1 because those will both exist. There we go. So what do we end up getting? So yes, I have now called Avatar an animated movie. Whatever. We'll fix that later. but the endpoint is working, and I think that's the important part. So now let's go make it so that when we click on one of these categories, checkboxes, we actually update things. So let's see what our options are for doing that. All right, so in our category selector on this field, we're going to override the onChange handler. Now I know we got in trouble doing that last time, but I think it's going to be okay this time because we're not relying on the formic values. We're relying on this one value here. So let's see if we can make that happen. So onChange equals, and it's going to be an event, and we're first going to call formic.handleChange with the event, and then we're going to call our own custom event handler. So what do we need to do about that? Let's make our event handler const on update category, and we're going to need a few things from there. We need to know which value it is. So we need to know the category ID, which is going to be a number, and we need to know if it is selected or not, or checked. So selected will be a Boolean. All right. And this will be an async function. And we will just console log for now the ID and selected. All right. So we've got that function now. This is saying E is implicitly in any type. We'll have to look at that, fix that in a minute. But for now, what I want to do is I want to say on update category, and the value is going to be E.target. We need to fix this property right now, I think. I think it's going to be like this. The event is of type ReactChange for an HTML input element, because this checkbox will be an input element. So now I should be able to say E.target.value, which is a string. We're going to convert that to a number. And then we're going to say E.target.checked. And that should be that. So what we're hoping for is to see the actual value in here and the actual, checked property. So let's see if we do. Over in our console, action is 3, 2, 7. Animated is 1. That we know is correct. Yeah, I believe this is correct now. So I do know animated is 1, so false and true. Okay, so we've got all the categories in there. All we need to do is actually add the category with our API. So let's go ahead and do that. So we have our ID, we have our selected. So all we have to do is determine whether we can actually do this. So we need to make const response equals fetch, and the URL is going to be process.env.reactAppBackend. Our endpoint is movie category. It's going to be a post, at least if we're adding it anyway. So why don't we say method is going to be selected post, otherwise it'll be delete, which we don't have yet, but we will later on. Okay, we don't need any headers. We're not posting any actual data. We don't have a body property either, but we do have the query parameters. All right, so let's make our query string. So let's say const query string equals new URL search params, and we can pass this an object. We need movie ID to be something, and category ID to be id.toString. Did we convert that to string and then convert it back to a number? Yes, we did. Let's not do that. That'll be easier to do if we don't have that being a string already. So the ID will be a string, and we'll just leave that there as a string ID. Movie ID is going to be from our state. We should have formic somewhere up here. So what we want to say first is if formic.values.movieID, if we have a movie ID, we can do all of these things. If we don't have movie ID, we can't do all these things. So formic.values.movieID. Okay, so now we have a query string. Let's say query string there. And that looks pretty good. So we can now fetch our response. And I don't think there's going to be a problem with, I don't know what happens if the category is already on there. We'll have to look at that in a little while. But for now, let's just get the data back. So const data equals await response.json. And I don't know, hope there's no 404 errors. I don't think there will be. And let's do a console.log of data. So let's see if that works. So we won't be able to delete one yet. We don't have that endpoint, but we should be able to add one. So if I go back over to our movie manager and let's refresh and let's select a movie and let's add the action thing. And do we have an action in the categories? Yes, we do. If we add animated, yeah, that works. And if we do this, we'll get a 405 method not allowed because we don't have that yet. So let's go add that real quick. So it's honestly going to be almost identical to this. We're just going to make a delete endpoint. I want to copy this entire thing right here, and we will tweak it. So we start out with delete movie category. It's all the same things, and then we will delete movie category. Movie ID, category ID, database, movie equals, CRUD, yada yada. That should be all fine. If we don't have it, it will be there. We need to, I'm going to say remove, not delete. Nah, I'm going to say delete. I don't know. Yeah, all we have to do is make this thing now, and everything else should be identical. So, yeah. Okay, so let's go look in our CRUD, and I have the ads. So let's copy the add movie category. It's going to be very similar for the delete. So we'll put that right here, and this will be delete movie category. And again, we'll return none if we don't find it. And then this is just remove category. And that's literally the only difference. All right, so that should be our new delete endpoint. So let's see if that actually worked. So if I do animated, what happens? It seems to be okay. Categories include animated. If I delete that, I get the movie back, and we get categories no longer has the animated stuff. Cool. So what we want to do, though, is we want to be able to reflect the status here when we pull this movie list. So let's see if we can do that. So back in our movie list under the set values, we're going to have movie categories, I think. So let's try that. Movie categories, and that should be data.categories. And will that work? Let's see here. Category type is not assignable to string type. So data categories is a category type, and movie categories is a string type. We need the IDs, not the whole thing. We're going to have to do some transformation of these categories. We need a new array of strings. So let's do this. I want to do a map, I think. Dot map. This will return a new array. So I want to take in the category, and I want to return the category.id. But I need it to be a string, so we'll do that. So there we go. There are our new movie categories. So let's see how that works. So if I switch movies, you see it disappears. I go back here, action appears again. If I add fantasy and go back, we still have fantasy. Yeah, I think that's working. All right, I need to do some cleanup of all this logging. We don't need to be in here, but yeah, effectively, this is all pretty much correct, I think, for the categories at least. I wonder why, when I click over here, and then click over here, that's a weird thing that I click over here. It doesn't actually select that, so I have to click it twice. Huh. Well, I don't worry about that for right now. Yeah, but basically the categories works. So yeah, hope you have enjoyed today's episode. If you did, give it a thumbs up, maybe subscribe to the channel, help us grow, and I will see you in the next episode where we will keep working on state and endpoints. Thanks for watching. See you then.